Senate compromise combining three bills. All cover programs about to expire. The compromise continues highway and transit programs for the next 2 years, student loan rates of 3.4% for another year, and the National Flood Control Program for 5 more years. The House is just beginning work on the measure now. You can see live coverage on C-SPAN, live coverage here on C-SPAN 2 of the U.S. Senate.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal God, the light of our lives, we lift our hearts to you in praise. May your presence be felt today on Capitol Hill. There is no one like you, for you protect the weak from the strong and the poor from the oppressor. Give our senators strength for today's journey. Deepen their trust in you as you guide them by your wisdom. As we anticipate the 4th of July, remind us that true freedom comes from you. And Lord, we ask your special blessings upon our outgoing Senate page class. We pray in your liberating name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., June 29, 2012. To the Senate. On the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Christopher A. Coons, a senator from the state of Delaware, to perform the duties of the chair. Son Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Mr. President,
The Majority Leader.
I move to proceed to count number 341S2237.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 341 S2237, a bill to provide a temporary income tax credit for increased payroll and extend bonus depreciation for an additional year and for other purposes.
Mr. President, I know senators are anxious as to what's going to happen here today. The Republican leader and I have been in close contact the last several days, and we're fortunate that we're now in a position to complete work today. We should be able to do it quickly. It all depends on the cooperation of senators. We actually know that the House is planning to vote around 12:30 today. They could do it more quickly. They could do it as late as 1 o'clock. We have the ability now that the papers have been filed over in the House. We could act before they do, as we've done before. So we'll have to see how the morning moves on. But we are working on a consent to have votes in relation to the Transportation Conference report this morning. I know senators have called and to me, I'm sure the Republican leader on a number of occasions. And as soon as we have something firmed up, we'll let everyone know. Mr. President, yesterday the United States Supreme Court reaffirmed that no family should live one illness or one accident away from bankruptcy. The Court's decision isn't a victory for Democrats or President Obama. It's a true victory for the American people. Let me give you a few reasons why that, in fact, is the case, and just a few. Since the act was signed by President Obama, more than 6 million young people have signed up for their parents' health plan. And, Mr. President, why is that important? Mr. President, as most people know, in the Senate at least, I'm from Searchlight, Nevada. It's a very small community. Somebody I care a great deal about. She was assistant postmistress there. Her husband has been around town. They've been together for many years. They have a boy named Jeff. And I can remember when we first had our home in Searchlight. He would help us as a young boy climbing up into a tree, putting into a yucca tree, Joshua tree, I'm sorry, Christmas tree lights. Well, he's grown past that. He was in college, doing quite well, and he started getting sick. He had just turned 23, and he, as embarrassed as it was, he had to go to a doctor and find out what was wrong. He had testicular cancer. That happened a matter of weeks after he was no longer on the insurance plan of his parents. They had no money. They were desperate to help their boy. And they did everything they could to help him. He had 2 or 3 surgeries. His life was saved, but it really put a dent in what limited savings they had. She worked part-time in the post office. He had worked down at the Mojave generating facility, which closed. So they had limited means, and it was really difficult on what savings they had been able to accumulate. That won't happen anymore. He would have been able to complete college because, you know, the magic age isn't 22 anymore, it's 27. So, Mr. President, that's one thing. And 6 million young Americans have taken advantage of that. They won't have to have the problem that Jeff Hill had. He's doing okay now. He recently married, but it was a struggle for a long time, physically and emotionally. Because children can now stay on their parents' insurance until they're 26, no young person will have to defer his or her dreams to take a job that offers insurance. Since health reform took effect, 5 million seniors have already saved about $600 each on prescription drugs. The donut hole is being filled. Now, maybe people watching this presentation here today don't know what the donut hole is, but every senior citizen knows what it is because it costs them lots and lots of money. And because of this law now no longer being debatable as far as whether or not it's going to stand, it's the law of the country, millions have gotten free wellness checks and cancer screenings. They could never have done that before. Millions, Mr. President. Free wellness checks and cancer screenings. That means millions of seniors have more money in their pockets for food, gas, and electric bill. And, Mr. President, frankly, a lot of them wouldn't spend that money anyway. They would just worry about whether they had cancer or whether they should wait a while to go see that doctor for their annual physical, which was way overdue. And it means millions of seniors, if in fact they're spending for this wellness check, won't have to anymore, and they can have this money for food, gas, and electric bills. Hundreds of thousands of businesses that already offer their employees health insurance are getting tax credits for doing the right thing. Since Congress passed this law, insurance companies can no longer put profits ahead of people. Now, Mr. President, it's no secret. The insurance company's been lobbying for a long, long time. 18 years ago, they lobbied against the Clinton health care plan, and they were very effective. The Harry and Louise ads defeated that legislation. They spent millions and millions of dollars, and they tried to defeat this legislation, and they've been lobbying hard. I don't know how they expected to affect the Supreme Court, but maybe they had ways that none of us understand, and I think they wasted their money. But in the future, insurance companies will no longer be able to put profits ahead of people. They can no longer discriminate against children with pre-existing conditions. Mr. President, I served in Congress, and we've been friends since I was going to law school back here. His name was James Bilbray, Jimmy Bilbray. He's had a wonderful career in politics in Nevada, but he and I, as young men back here, were raising our little kids together. We were going to law school. We both worked here on Capitol Hill. His little boy, Kevin, got so sick. He was just a baby. Just a baby. He didn't know what was wrong. He had a diabetic coma. This little baby had diabetes. Kevin lived to be about 20 years old. He had a diabetic reaction and was taking a shower, fell over the stop on the bathtub where the shower was, and he drowned. It killed him. He died. Kevin Bilbray. He had diabetes. And of course, getting insurance was always a problem for that family. No longer, Mr. President. No longer if a child like the Bilbrays, like little Kevin, who has diabetes, they won't have to worry about, can I get insurance? And not only will it apply in the future, it applies right now to people under age 18, but in the future, everybody who has a pre-existing disability will be entitled to insurance. They cannot be denied because of pre-existing disability. Now, it's not only diabetes, heart defects. I know he never talks about this, but I know Senator Durbin had a child from the time she was a baby, had a heart defect. She was sick her whole life. Dick lost his girl. Dick and Laura lost her a couple of years ago. She was 40 years old, or thereabouts. But her whole life she had a heart defect. In the future, Mr. President, people like that will be able to get insurance. They cannot be denied. I met right over here in the LBJ room yesterday morning. I have my welcome to Washington. And there were a number of people there. The granddaughter of someone that my oldest brother went to school with, Teddy Dask's grandchild, was there. Why? Because she was there representing her brother who has cystic fibrosis. Now, I don't know, Mr. President, if you have ever been around anyone with cystic fibrosis, but as I explained to them over there yesterday morning, one of my son's coaches had a son who had cystic fibrosis. And, you know, they would have to beat on his chest, and he had this process to try to loosen the stuff that accumulated in your lung because of this disease. And kids used to live not very long with this. We're doing a lot better now. We have some medicines. But, Mr. President, in the future, anyone with cystic fibrosis will not be able to deny insurance because of this dread disease. Now, if you're under age 18, you cannot be denied insurance because you have this dread disease. Insurance companies can no longer raise your rates for no reason. How many times have we heard stories about insurance companies raising rates for no reason other than they wanted to, and there was no way to stop it? They can no longer drop your coverage if you get sick, and they did that. They can no longer do that. That is now against the law of this country. And millions of Americans, Mr. President, are already seeing the benefit of this law. And soon 35 million more who can't afford health insurance will have access to reasonably priced insurance and quality care. Here's how it works. Each state will set up its own health insurance marketplace called an exchange, which will offer a menu of private insurance plans from which people can choose. Now, the presiding officer is a relatively new senator here. I've been in Congress now for a long time, and every year we get a menu of options. Like all federal employees, senators don't get treated any differently than other federal employees. We get a number of options as to what we want to buy. Price of one up here or down here. That's what we want for everybody in America, something just like the millions of federal employees have, and that's what we will have. We'll offer a menu of private insurance plans from which people can choose what they want. Once these exchanges are in place, insurance companies will no longer be able to discriminate against any American with a pre-existing health condition, just like I've talked about. They won't be able to deny you insurance because you're sick. They won't be able to charge you more just because you're a woman. And that is fact. They won't be able to do it anymore. Or because you don't already have insurance. And if you can't afford the premiums, you'll get a tax credit to help pay for them. But what if you're one of the 250 million Americans who already has insurance? Nothing will change. Nothing. Nothing will change except you'll no longer have to worry that if you lose your job, you'll lose your insurance. Nothing will change except that if you get cancer or have a stroke, your insurance company won't be able to deny you life-saving care because you reach some arbitrary lifetime cap. These are not theoretical, Mr. President. A man in Las Vegas was a racer in cars, and he wasn't racing a car, but someone negligently hurt him. He became a paraplegic. And he got along pretty well. Needed a lot of care. He arrived at some lifetime cap. He had an insurance policy. He has no insurance. They can't do that anymore. You'll be able to, that provision, Mr. President, this lifetime cap will help untold hundreds of thousands of people. Nothing will change also except that when you get a checkup and preventive care, it will be free. A provision that has already helped 54 million Americans with private insurance. You'll be able to keep your plan and keep your doctor. But now, you, not the insurance company, will be in control. And by August, almost 13 million people will get a rebate check from their insurance company because it spent too much on administrative costs and not enough on health care. You can't any longer put all the profits into these multi-million-dollar bonuses and salaries that people had. Can't do that. 80% of what you get, you have to put into helping people get well. Mr. President, this is so very, very important, to explain to people what's in this bill. These are things that people want to take away? I don't think so. You can yell and scream about Obamacare, but explain these individual provisions. And this money will come back in August. I was listening to public radio this morning, Mr. President, and they interviewed someone who ran a insurance exchange, I think they called it. And he was waiting by the phone, this was all on the radio, for the decision to come out yesterday. He was so happy because CNN and Fox announced it had been the case had been overruled. No longer. Oh, he was so happy. But when he learned it was still in effect, he was very sad because why? He said, we're not be able to pay our salaries as much as we had. Well, you know, if we looked at that, he was paying a lot for salaries for the bosses and not enough to put the money into taking care of people. The Affordable Care Act is already helping millions of Americans, seniors on Medicare, children with heart conditions, students with their dreams. And in coming months, many millions more will benefit from this law. That doesn't mean the law is perfect, Mr. President. We all know that. And we're willing to work next year. And if there are any problems that we need to try to work out, we'll be happy to work with our colleagues to do that. But now that the Supreme Court has spoken, it's time to renew our focus on the most pressing challenge facing America today, the high unemployment rate that we have. Too many Americans are still struggling, and Congress can't afford to waste time refighting old battles. Now we need to work together to put Americans back to work. And, Mr. President, just a little side note. These people that talk about repealing this, it would cause the loss of 400,000 jobs. If you look at all the job statistics the past year, where's some of the most significant growth taking place? Healthcare. So I don't think repealing this and losing right off the bat 400,000 jobs is a good idea. Mr. President, thanks to cooperation on both sides, the Senate's going to vote sometime today on a transportation bill conference report. And it's a wonderful piece of legislation. It includes student loans, the problems we had with flood insurance. These are all three very important things that will be completed, hopefully fairly early today. The flood insurance program being extended will allow millions of home closings to go forward at a time when our real estate market is just beginning to rebound. Preventing interest rates from doubling on 7 million students was a major priority for all of us, and I'm glad we were able to get it done. And passing the 2 years, 3 months transportation bill will create or save 2.8 million American jobs, many of them in the hard-hit construction industry. It will restore millions of miles of crumbling roadways, railways, and bridges. And it is very important, Mr. President, it streamlines the process, getting rid of a lot of the ability for entities to stall the construction of these much-needed roads. I had an experience like this in Nevada, and that's why I was so supported Senator Boxer and Inhofe in streamlining the process to get these projects over with. because of an experience I had in Las Vegas. So it's been a very productive week. We're going to restore millions of miles of crumbling roadways, railways, and bridges. So it's been a very fruitful session that we've had. We've passed a bipartisan farm bill. We've taken a real hard look at how we're going to make the Postal Service better. And the farm bill was very difficult. It took a long time to get it done, but we got it done. So I'm optimistic the Senate will maintain the spirit of collaboration during the next work period when we consider a number of job creation measures and a number of important other things that we need to do. So I hope my colleagues have a constructive week and at home. Got a lot of work to do, and I understand that. I hope everyone's safe and happy, and certainly extend my recognition to the states of Colorado who've had these devastating fires. And the West is having real problems. We have over 200 fires that are burning as we speak. 11 of them are major fires. And we have to make sure that we give the firefighting people the resources to do this. And I was happy within the past month to be part of a program to advance the purchase of these tankers to fight these fires. We were able to do that. So when we come back to work in 10 days or so, everyone has to understand we have a lot to do to ensure this country's economic future. And I look forward to taking on that challenge together. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Commerce be discharged from further consideration of S. 1335, and we now proceed to that matter.
Is there objection? Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent that the Hutchinson-Inhofe amendment at the desk be agreed to. The bill as amended be read a third time and passed. The motion to reconsider be laid upon the table, and any statements relating to the measure appear at the appropriate place in the record as if given.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President,
The Republican leader.
I'm going to address two issues this morning. First, the highway bill. I want to commend in particular the senior senator from Oklahoma for the extraordinary work he's done to produce a transportation bill that has significant reforms in it. He's been tenacious and effective. He's tugged on our sleeves and pointed out to us repeatedly the importance of getting this job done, and I want to congratulate him for an extraordinary accomplishment. With regard to that bill, the Highway Conference Report contains significant reforms to the surface transportation program. Projects now will be completed in a more timely manner because for the first time there are hard deadlines on agencies to complete environmental reviews. Also, states are given maximum flexibility to use their transportation dollars the way they chose rather than how Washington dictates. This bill is fully paid for with a package of offsets, mostly included in the Senate-passed highway bill. The conference report also contains important legislation to reform the National Flood Insurance Program and to prevent college student loans from doubling. The flood insurance bill is a model of reform. It moves this long-failing program closer to where it should be, the private sector. These reforms actually cut subsidies, save the taxpayer money, and greatly improve the program's financial position. And it was negotiated and reported out of committee on a bipartisan basis. On the student loan issue, Republicans and Democrats worked hard to find common ground. The agreement we've reached will ensure that college students who are already facing enormous challenges in the Obama economy won't be paying higher interest rates next month. Students can't wait for the president to get off the campaign trail and actually work with Congress to prevent student loan interest rates from rising this year. So while the president continues to ignore the bipartisan proposal sent more than 3 weeks ago, Senate Democrats dropped their demand for job-killing tax hikes and worked with Republicans to find solutions. It's nice to finally see the Senate start to actually work like the Senate used to. It proves if this body ignores the campaign attacks from the president, and if our Democratic friends stop pushing job-killing tax hikes, we can actually get a lot done around here. And I once again want to thank my colleagues for their hard work on this important measure. Now, Mr. President, on the most important issue brought to the front page the last 2 days, and that is the state of the new Obamacare law. 2.5 years ago, President Obama teamed up with Democrats right here in Congress to pass a health care bill they knew most Americans didn't really want. Americans had been very clear about what they thought of this bill. So Democrats settled on a deeply dishonest sales pitch aimed at convincing them otherwise. And nearly every day since then, the promises that formed the very heart of that sales pitch have been exposed for the false promises they were. Americans were promised lower health care costs, but of course they're going up. Americans were promised lower premiums, and they're going up. Seniors were promised Medicare would be protected. It was rated to pay for a new entitlement instead. We were promised it would create jobs. CBO predicts it will lead to 800,000 fewer jobs. 800,000 fewer jobs because of Obamacare. People were promised they could keep the plans that they liked. Millions have now learned they can't. For 2 years, the list of broken promises has grown longer and longer and longer. But yesterday morning, we got powerful confirmation of what may have been the biggest deception of all. For years, the President and his Democrat allies in Congress have sworn up and down that failing to comply with the individual mandate did not result in a tax on individuals or families. It's not a tax, they said. And the reason was obvious. If Americans knew that failure to comply resulted in a tax hike, of course the bill would never have passed. If our friends on the other side had conceded the obvious, that it was in fact a tax hike, we all know it never would have passed. And the President wouldn't be able to claim his health care bill didn't raise taxes on the middle class as he did again and again and again. Well, yesterday the court blew the President's cover. In a narrowly upheld case on one basis only, that the penalty associated with the individual mandate is a tax, the court spoke. Congress doesn't have the constitutional authority to mandate insurance coverage under the Commerce Clause, it said. Congress doesn't have the authority to mandate individual insurance coverage under the Commerce Clause. But it obviously does have the power to tax. So they upheld the central provision of this bill on the fact that the penalty for failing to comply with it was a tax. In the eyes of the court, that's all the penalty tied to the individual mandate ever was. A tax imposed by a Democratic Congress without a single Republican vote, primarily, interestingly enough, Mr. President, primarily on the middle class, a tax on the middle class. So let's be very clear about that. The tax connected to the individual mandate is not primarily a tax on the rich, but on the middle-class Americans who will bear the brunt of it. Listen to this, colleagues. According to the CBO, at least 77% of the people paying this tax will meet the President's own definition of the middle class. 77% of the people paying this tax will meet the President's own definition of the middle class. Those who have to pay the tax will pay an average tax of $1,200. And even if they pay it every year, they still won't have insurance. So yesterday's decision turns the President's campaign rhetoric on its head. Those who will end up paying the heaviest burden for not buying government-mandated insurance are not going to be the wealthiest Americans. Oh, no. But the very middle-class families the President claims to defend. That's the truth the court unmasked yesterday. Now, most Americans thought the process Democrats used to pass their health care bill was unseemly, secretive, partisan, even anti-democratic. They also thought it was unconstitutional for the government to create commerce in order to regulate it, for the government to create commerce in order to regulate it. Now, all of that is still true. But what many Americans may not have appreciated when this bill was passed was how empty all the promises were. How completely empty all the promises were. And at the center of them all was the claim that failing to buy health insurance did not result in a tax. That was the central claim. Failing to buy health insurance did not result in a tax. But the court has now spoken. It is a tax, largely on the middle class. And this is just one more reason why this law needs to be repealed in its entirety. With every passing day, we learn something new about this terrible law. Not only does it make the problems in our health care system worse, it leads to a tax on middle-class families who are either unable or unwilling to purchase health insurance. What a terrible idea. So it's time for Democrats to stop trying to defend the indefensible and join Republicans in wiping this colossal legislative mistake clear off the books. Yesterday's decision gives us the clearest proof yet that this bill has to go. It needs to be repealed to clear the way for common sense, step-by-step reforms that protect Americans' access to the care they need from the doctor they choose at a lower cost. And that's precisely what Republicans intend to do. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved, and under the previous order, senators are permitted to speak for 10 minutes. The senator from Iowa.
The Supreme Court yesterday overturned the mandatory Medicaid expansion in the Affordable Care Act. As of yesterday, the state now will have a choice to expand or not expand coverage to the poorest people in society without being subjected to harsh federal penalties. I'd like to draw attention to a speech that I gave on the Senate floor on this subject December 2011. The subject was the constitutionality of the Medicaid expansion in the health care reform bill. I expressed my concerns then about the potential impact of the Supreme Court decision on Medicaid expansion. I said on the floor that day, quote, "A Supreme Court ruling in favor of the states, in this case, could not only jeopardize the mandated Medicaid expansion in the Affordable Care Act, but could challenge the fundamental structure of Medicaid and have broader implications outside of health care." End of my quote back December last year. The concerns I expressed then have, to a degree, come true as a result of the court's decision yesterday. Reading from the Washington Post editorial this morning about the court ruling on Medicaid, quote, "This restriction of federal authority may have greater ramifications than the court's limiting of the Commerce Clause. One can imagine challenges to federal conditions across a wide spectrum of programs, including, but not limited to the environment, education, and transportation." End of quote from the Washington Post today. This decision overturns the mandatory expansion of Medicaid program. And while I realize most of the focus is on the decision related to the tax mandate, we should spend a moment talking about the consequences of the Medicaid decision. One of the goals of the health care reform was to provide coverage for people in need. I would argue that the people most in need of coverage are people without a job, people without income, and the poorest of the poor. The Affordable Care Act requires states to cover people below poverty through Medicaid. States were mandated to expand to cover people below poverty. Now, yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled that mandatory expansion is unconstitutional. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice Roberts said, quote, "Nothing in our opinion precludes Congress from offering funds under the Affordable Care Act to expand the availability of health care and requiring states accepting such funds to comply with the conditions of their use. What Congress is not free to do," Justice Roberts says, "is to penalize states that choose not to participate in that new program by taking away their existing Medicaid funding." End of Chief Justice quote. With this decision, states now have the option to expand Medicaid to cover people below poverty. The states had that option even before Affordable Care Act was passed. So what does this decision mean in real terms? It will be up to the states, of course, to determine if they will cover the poorest of the poor. The federal government cannot guarantee that coverage. So now, people with jobs will have to purchase insurance under the tax mandate. But people without income, people who are below poverty, are dependent upon the state in which they reside. Now, I know some people will believe that the choice is perfunctory, that Medicaid expansion will move forward because the federal government has offered to pay for more than 90% of the expansion. But if you were a state, would you really trust a promise from this federal government that is $15 trillion in debt? If you were a state, would you really trust an Obama administration that proposed eliminating the special federal payment rate through a proposal known as the blended rate? States will very reasonably be risk adverse. States can now expand if they choose to, or not at all. No one should assume for a second all states will expand to cover as much as was mandated under the Affordable Care Act. Of course, you might think people below poverty could still get health care through tax credits, but the people who wrote this bill made people below poverty ineligible for tax credits. So that's help's not available. Those people are ineligible. It's all or nothing for the poor with Medicaid. With today's ruling, the answer is nothing. On December the 15th, 2011, I said on the Senate floor that the expansion of Medicaid and the coverage of poor people was in jeopardy because, quote, and this is my quote, "The White House and the Democratic majority put their partisan goals ahead of collaboration with Republicans and states to build legitimate public policy," end of quote. Today, that is the outcome. People with income, people with jobs are mandated to purchase health insurance and face a tax penalty if they don't, while the poorest people in society, those without job or without income, have a guarantee of nothing. I think a victory lap's about the decision yesterday is premature, particularly for the 17 to 20 million people that this Affordable Care Act promised coverage to. After this decision, a person in a family with an income of more than $80,000 a year would be guaranteed access to a subsidy to buy private insurance, while a person in a family with no income would be guaranteed nothing. When people below poverty, the people who least can afford coverage, or the consequences of not having coverage, are left with nothing, it sounds like failure to this senator. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Arizona.
Mr. President, regarding yesterday's Supreme Court decision, there have been a variety of very interesting editorials, op-ed pieces, blogs, many of them erudite and very useful for the analysis of the Court's opinion. Of course, it will take a long time for us to know precisely how all of this will work out over time. I thought I might refer to a couple of these opinions and op-eds, put them in the congressional record for people to see what a sampling might look like so they can more thoroughly analyze the opinion, and then pose a question at the end. I start with one of my friends, and I think one of the best columnists, even nationally, that I know. He writes for my local paper, the Arizona Republic. His name is Bob Robb. And he writes in his column on June 29th, and I quote, "Roberts' decision controlled the outcome even though it was fully joined by no other justice. Here's what he concluded. The federal government has no power under the Constitution's Commerce Clause to require individuals to purchase health insurance, as Obamacare does. However, the federal government does have the power to impose a financial penalty on people for not complying with the mandate the federal government has no authority to impose. That's because the penalty is actually a tax under Congress's constitutional taxing authority. However, the penalty is not a tax for purposes of the Anti-Injunction Act, which would preclude the court from considering the legality until someone actually pays it." Obviously, Mr. President, these dilemmas require some explanation, and it may be, and this is my phrasing, not Bob Robb's, that this is a good example of where the phrase legal legerdemain comes into play. Robb continues, "If Congress has no authority to require people to do something, such as purchase health insurance, how can it penalize them for not doing it? And how can money owed exclusively because of failing to comply with an unconstitutional mandate be regarded as a tax and not a penalty?" He goes on to say, "The purpose of the constitutional taxing power is to raise the money to operate the government. The clause reads, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States," end of quote. "The purpose of the penalty," Robb continues, "for not buying health insurance isn't to raise revenue. The government would prefer not to get any money from it at all. The purpose is to compel compliance with the mandate that Chief Justice Roberts says the government has no power to impose. There's nothing in the Constitution that can remotely be construed as giving Congress the power to tax people, not to raise revenue, but to punish them for failing to do what Congress would like them to do." And Robb concludes, "If Congress cannot do something directly, it shouldn't be able to do it indirectly through taxation." Mr. President, this raises a very important question, I think. If the taxing power can be used to institute mandates such as Obamacare, the real question is what limits there are on such taxing power. And I believe this may be one of the most important unanswered questions in Justice Roberts' opinion. One attempt to square the circle, in effect, was by writer Joshua Hawley in the Daily Caller in his column, "What's Behind Roberts' Surprising Decision?" And I note that Hawley comes to this with some credentials, being described as a former law clerk to Chief Justice Roberts as well as an associate law professor at the University of Missouri. In effect, as I read Hawley's piece, he says that Justice Roberts actually constrained Congress's power dramatically by, first of all, drawing a clear line on the reasonable and proper extension of the Commerce Clause power, but also, he said, that the taxing authority Roberts uses to justify Congress's action in Obamacare is actually very, very limited. In fact, he says that Roberts attempted to make this case sui generis. That's the Latin phrase for one of a kind, and that only in this particular case would the taxing authority be permissibly used to require for Congress to require the people to do something. I hope that Hawley's analysis is correct. I'm not so sure that it is. It certainly, Roberts' opinion certainly will make it more politically difficult for Congress to pass things that extend its authority, because they'll have to be clothed in the cloak of a tax, and Congress doesn't generally like to pass new taxes on people. But Congress and the lawyers that advise us are pretty clever about phrasing legislation in such a way that it would meet constitutional challenges. And now that we have a new example of a power that we might exercise, namely this expanded taxing power, I suspect we will see efforts in the future to clothe our legislation in that, under the guise of that taxing power. And if so, the constraints in Chief Justice Roberts' opinion would be no constraints at all. There's an old saying that hard cases make bad law. I don't know that this was all that hard of a case, but it clearly resulted in a lot of different points of view from the justices, from which one could conclude at least they saw it as a hard case. I just hope that the end result is not bad law, as I've suggested it could be here today. Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent at the conclusion of my remarks here to insert into the congressional record the following pieces. First, the Robert Robb column dated June 29th from the Arizona Republic. Second, a couple of pieces that I think are somewhat representative. The Wall Street Journal editorial of June 28th, Obamacare and the Power to Tax. A Rich Lowry piece on National Review Online, dated June 29th, The Umpire Blinks. A National Review Online piece by the editors, June 28th, Chief Justice Roberts' Folly. And I think since I referred to it, I should probably also insert the Joshua Hawley piece dated June 28th from the Daily Caller, and would also and that's the end of my unanimous consent request, Mr. President.
Without objection.
Thank you. And I would also refer people to two very, very fine lawyers who write on these matters on a weekly and monthly basis, and have an excellent piece in the Wall Street Journal, A Triumph and Tragedy for the Law is what they call it, David Rifkin, Jr. and Lee Casey, both fine lawyers that frequently opine on matters of this sort. Mr. President, I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
bit today, I rise to recognize West Virginia's
The Senator
United
reminds
Way.
we are in a quorum call.
Oh, I ask the quorum call to be officiated.
Without objection.
Again, to lighten the mood a little bit today, Mr. President, I rise to recognize West Virginia's United Way as a special organization celebrates its 125th anniversary. The United Way was founded in 1887 by community leaders in Denver, Colorado. The renowned organization originated through a group of individuals who came together with the drive to improve community conditions. Since then, the organization has grown to 1,800 community-based United Ways in 41 countries and remains the world's largest privately supported nonprofit, raising nearly $5 billion annually. In our little state of West Virginia, United Way has touched the lives of so many people. United Way volunteers have clocked thousands of hours of community service through health services, senior assistance programs, student tutoring, nutritional sites, job skills training, and financial literary services. United Way has enthusiastically embraced local institutions throughout our state. This wonderful organization has provided for at-risk teens at residential treatment centers like the Daymark around Kanawha Valley. It has supported comprehensive medical and health services at establishments such as the West Virginia's chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, West Virginia Health Right, Cabell Huntington Children's Hospital, Thomas Memorial Hospital, and the Putnam County Dental Health Council. United Way has supported family counseling at the Kanawha Valley Fellowship Home and at Family Counseling Connection. It has also benefited emergency assistance facilities such as the Boone County Community Organization and Madison Baptist Church, Mountain Mission, and Nitro St. Albans Care and Share. In 2011 alone, 68,337 individuals were served by United Way supported programs in West Virginia alone. More than 13,162 children and youth benefited from the services of United Way partner agencies, and more than 26,997 people received financial assistance from a United Way partner agency. In addition, nearly 28,000 people received health-related assistance from a United Way partner agency also. I have also been an avid supporter of United Way and their community service efforts, and my wife, Gail, also served as the chairwoman of Marion County's United Way. I applaud the organization's ability to inspire members in their communities to work together and improve all aspects of their neighborhoods. United Way has so many laudable goals. The organization is working to promote a healthier society by working with families to develop healthy lifestyles. While Americans continue to struggle in tough economic times, United Way has worked with families to help them achieve financial stability. For example, United Way launched the Financial Stability Partnership, which aims to have the approximately 40 million Americans who are working in low-paying jobs without basic health benefits. United Way has also targeted key areas of education, addressing problems such as the student dropout rate and preparing children for success at an early age. United Way also has identified community health care needs and focuses efforts on changing health policies and practices for Americans of all ages. About 47 million Americans don't have health care coverage, and more than 80% are working families. The organization tackles tough health problems like health insurance coverage, along with the obesity epidemic and prescription drug abuse. These are tough issues that oftentimes have no easy solutions. I applaud United Way and all of its staff members, its volunteers, and community leaders for their efforts to improve the quality of life in all of our communities. Mr. President, today the United Way has every reason to celebrate its success as they face this impressive milestone. I once again congratulate their achievements, and I look forward to seeing what this great organization will accomplish in the next 125 years and beyond. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, before the senator from West Virginia leaves, I just want to publicly thank him for all of his support in something that just happened just a few minutes ago, and that is our passage of the Pilot's Bill of Rights. And there have been several on both sides. Certainly Senator Begich has been working hard, Senator Pryor and Senator Manchin. as well as many on the Republican side. But it is a reality now, and it's something I look at this as kind of a strange day for me anyway, because I've been working on 2 bills for a year and a half. Both will become a reality on the same day. One, of course, the highway bill, the other everyone knows about, then the Pilots' Bill of Rights, the only pilots know about. And you know, when you stop and think that we've been, and I've been a pilot for 55 years, and I get all the calls and the complaints that come in. But when you stop and think that the pilots are really the only ones in our society that are denied access to justice, like every other citizen is, and this corrects that. And so I just want to say to my friend that I appreciate very much his support in making this a reality.
Well, Mr. President, if I may say, the leadership of my good friend from Oklahoma and his unwavering support and basically bringing this to all of our attentions. I've been a pilot for not quite 55 years, but at 45 years. And with that being said, I understand completely, but Senator Inhofe brought it to I think, to attention to all of us, and even the non-pilots in our groups and ranks here. His steadfast leadership and support of this, and also his ability to work across the aisle with those on our side of the aisle, the Democrats, I appreciate so much that. And his leadership, I know that Senator Boxer feels very, very compelled about this, and your leadership in working with her on the transportation bill, both of you bringing that to the forefront for all of us, and we're all going to benefit by that. I thank you, sir, and continue to look forward to working with you.
Well, I appreciate my friend very much. Let me, Mr. President, just make a couple of comments. I'll be in more detail later. But I know a lot of people are going to want to be getting on the floor talking about the bill that will be most likely passes today in both the House and the Senate. And that is the problem that was there. A lot of people are not aware of the fact that a general aviation pilot doesn't have the same access to remedies as everybody else does. And what makes this a little bit more compelling to do something about is that if you're not a pilot, you don't appreciate the fact that these are, a lot of them are single-issue people. And I had an experience where I actually, my life was in my license was in jeopardy for something that we find out that I didn't do. And then I happened to think, you know, all these complaints that I've had over the years about abusive treatment by some of the enforcement people were I never appreciated it until it happened to me. So, and I would say this, I know more people in the FAA that do a great job. They're very conscientious. These are career people. The problem is that every once in a while you have someone in the field with enforcement powers that just can't handle that kind of a power. I was mayor of Tulsa for a number of years, several years back. We had a great police force. But now and then you had people on that force who couldn't handle the power, and so they would abuse that power. And you have to seek them out, and you have to, and that's what this is all about. When you have elected people, and you hear from these people when abuses take place. So what we've done is correct that. We actually have a system set up in this that if someone is accused or cited for doing something that was wrong or might be a violation of one of the FARs, that person will now have access to the evidence that would be used against that person. And people say, well, wasn't that happening anyway? No, it wasn't. When this happened to me, I can remember very well, and I say to the chair, because we're very close, and he knows I've been active in aviation for a long time. A year ago in October, I went to land at an airport, one of the most southernmost airports in America. It's in South Texas, one I've landed on more than 200 times. I know every square foot of that. It's an uncontrolled field. And when I came in, there's a thing called NOTAMs, Notice to Airmen. And you are supposed to, and you should, find out what the NOTAMs are on the land that you'll be, on the runway you'll be landing on. So that if there's work on the runway, if there's any towers going up, if there's construction going on, you'll know that in advance. That's your obligation. The problem is there's never been a central location where that can be found. And so in this case, there was no NOTAM that had been published. So there I go in with a controller in the valley down there that is that has actually cleared me to land. And here I am, a United States Senator. It took me 4 months to get the voice recorder. And I never did find out, early on what the evidence was against me. As it turned out fine. But nonetheless, 4 months to find out, to get a voice recorder that you were cleared to land, that's unreasonable. The other things, I see my friend from Indiana is on the floor, and I don't want to take any more time on this, but on the NOTAM situation, we will have a central location for that. And the other problem we're having right now is medical certification. I have case after case. In fact, the AOPA, AOPA, that's the Airmen Pilots Association, yeah. Anyway, you're talking about 400,000 pilots that are out there. They have as their #1 concern the lack of consistency and uniformity in the medical certification. A person could be a pilot and can have a condition, it could be a light heart attack or something, temporarily lose his license, then go back and have it reinstated. However, if he lives in another town, has a different doctor, that may not happen. So we have people out there who have lost their licenses when they should have been. Well, we're going to have a panel set up that's going to include general aviation, include the medical community, to try to get uniformity. And this is just 3 of the major reforms that we have in this legislation. So with that, I will yield the floor and be talking about that later, and also talking about the upcoming highway bill. And I only want to remind people, my good conservative friends, that people who are trying to say that this is not a conservative bill, it is. The worst thing we can do is continue to operate our road building and our construction in this country on extensions. When you do an extension, you lose about 30% of the money. So obviously, the conservative position is to do this. We have reforms, incredible reforms, enhancement reforms. So we'll be talking about that during the course of the day. With that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Indiana.
Mr. President, can I ask what the procedure is regarding time here?